A very good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen, friends, and a very warm welcome to Penang Institute. And it's really marvelous to see such a wonderful turnout on a Tuesday evening for tonight's event. Now, as you know, we're here to provide the official Penang launch for the latest book by the eminent and scoundrel-like journalist, Nadeswaran. We hope in the course of tonight's conversation that we'll be looking not only at the core focus of his book, which is, of course, the 1MDB scandal, but also I hope that the conversation will take us more broadly into looking at the terrain of Malaysian politics and Malaysian media as they stand today. And now to offer some words of welcome, please give a hand to the director of the Penang Institute, Dr. Curi Curi Malaysia.
Thank you, Gareth. Oh, good evening, everyone. Welcome, all friends of Penang Institute. This is going to be, I think, our last talk for the year. So let me start by wishing everyone a happy festive season, and I hope everyone loads up with energy and optimism for the coming months. Now, the future of journalism has been one of the issues that Penang Institute has been focusing on for a few years now. And over the last 3 years, we have worked with different partners on that issue, including the US Embassy in KL and the German institution Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, based in Singapore, in order to connect with dynamic young journalists working with new technologies and new readerships from throughout the region. Now, how journalism as a profession and as a duty is being disrupted in the digital age and how this is happening is a major concern that we all need to study in the near future. But given all that, journalism's basic function, I think, remains that of uncovering facts, reporting facts, and contextualizing facts. Journalism in any society may be considered alive and well to the extent that it is investigative, articulate, and audacious, that its practitioners are critical yet fair, and bold yet judicious. Penang Institute is therefore very happy today to be the venue for the launching of a very special book titled Scandals and Scoundrels, a collection of essays on 1MDB and related issues written by R. Nadeswaran. How a scandal unfolds, especially one as big as 1MDB, tells us a lot about a country's political condition. And so Citizen Nades, exercising his rights and duties as a citizen of Malaysia, has compiled his writings about scandals and scoundrels to remind us that things do not change overnight, and scandals like company the way scoundrels do. Penang Institute welcomes Mr. R. Nadeswaran tonight, and we all look forward to a discussion on the subjects highlighted in his books and his writings in general. We congratulate him on his achievement, and we look forward to reading more from him, not because we think scandals are to be celebrated, but because we like insightful writings. A lawyer who loves investigative journalism is a formidable force. We are also very happy to have Dato Sri Anwar Fazal here to provide some introductory remarks, following which our constant collaborator, Gareth from Gerakbudaya Bookshop, will moderate the session. So thank you all for coming. Thank you for your attention. And again, a happy festive season to all. Thank you.
Dr. Curi, our host, Nades, my comrade during our years at the MACC when we were appointed by Badawi and removed by Najib. I was appointed by Najib and removed by Najib. Oh, both together. Okay, yeah. So you had a double suffering. And Gareth, always a great pleasure to have you steering us with your eloquence and intellectualism, because very hard to find a moderator who himself is a great intellectual and able to see through things that are really worthy of paying attention, and those to which you just smile and move on. Yeah? Ajit, my wife's classmate, we're dear friends, and who actually introduced the fact that Nades was going to be here in Penang and would like to organize this. I said, "Great, let's do it." Yeah? And we made it happen. We are also very delighted to have some very special people at this meeting who've come from distances. One of them is actually was the former president of the Malaysian Institute of Integrity, and that's Dato Anis, who's sitting down there, who has written extensively on corruption issues, including a very classic book called Combating Corruption, which Ideas worked on. We also have a former staff of Ideas itself, and a whole range of people, some of whom have been public interest persons. We have Ramakrishnan here, who was early recipient, in fact, the first recipient of Integrity Award at the Institute of Integrity by the Chief Secretary, and it's an organization that was very worthy, and I will mention that to you. Welcome also to Penang. Penang, where over 200 years ago, the first magistrate appointed was dismissed for corruption. So you can see we have a long history of experience in this particular field. In 1967, leaping forward to nearly 2 centuries, allegations of corruption in the City Council of Georgetown by the person who has a road named after him that's just adjoining the Penang Institute. I will not mention the name. Yeah. Go there and have a look. Yeah, because there's even protests when the name was put in there. But he lived just across at the house that is now a restaurant. Yeah. He exposed corruption in the City Council, or what people will call kopitiam corruption, yeah? Plus some things you may consider a little bit more serious. He had differences of opinion between the socialist government and his own departure from the socialist government to join later MACC. But this exposure by him led to the suspension of the City Council and the beginning of the death of local democracy in this country. Governments decided after that not to have any more elections for any local authority anywhere. There was an occasion and a feeling that we must destroy this local authority at the local level, because those were the places where the government that was in power will be losing always. So you found the local authorities usually in the hands of different opinions, because urban views and so on very often are quite different. So that whole system was removed as a result of a good effort. In 1969, a very important date in our history, we not only saw the famous riots, but there was a dramatic change in government, and people very often forget that we have had other dramatic gains, where the alliance was literally eliminated, and a party called the Gerakan came into force. And the Gerakan party's chairman, they became the only state where they actually ran. Gerakan had a series of intellectuals who were leading it, and one of the really great intellectuals of this country, whose name was Said Hussein Alatas. Yes, Syed Hussein Alatas was the chairman, and he was leading this, and he came to Penang several times. I had the occasion. He lived very simply in a coffee shop hotel in Campbell Street, and I had to go and pick him up in my old Ford Prefect, the two-door Ford Prefect that you know in the old times, because the chief minister did not want to abuse using official cars to visit, to take somebody who is the chairman of his party, but who does not have, real, authority. But these are little things. Very often they are quite important, yeah, for that, yeah. And he wrote the first article for the Encyclopedia of Sociology on sociology, corruption, sociology and corruption, or the sociology of corruption. A remarkable article that goes into an encyclopedia, a global encyclopedia. That's a very rare thing, of the first time such an entry ever entered. He then wrote a book, yeah, on corruption, which was Understanding Corruption. It was a pioneering book, the sociology. Then beyond that, he changed it later to Corruption, its Nature, Causes, and Functions. Yeah? I mean, very, you can say, as comprehensive as you can be. Yeah, and he gives, like 11 types of corruption that are there. So such scientifically, yeah, organized. And in 2005, a prince, now a sultan, spoke at that launch in that year, warning everybody that corruption may soon become an industry. Yeah, which is a very interesting statement. It soon did, and not only did it was flourishing. Yeah, very soon. Very, very quickly after that. Yeah. In Penang, again, in the 60s, we saw the first murder of a whistleblower. Ooh, no wonder there was silence very, very often after that. Of a whistleblower who was shot dead while riding a motorbike, and his body was found in a drain in that's Jalan Masjid Negeri now, in the place. Yeah, and sixthly, the sixth little story about Penang that was built in the 1970s that destroyed, led to the slow destruction of the very iconic, ecologically friendly ferry system. And it was something that actually at that time you did not need, with money you did not have. And of course they got another country to build it for us. Yeah, I will not mention the country. If you're interested in, we can have a separate session on the personalities and people involved. I was told by a federal government officer, very senior government officer, about 20 years later. And he told me how this company, that was from another country, left briefcases of money at their desk after meeting various people. We don't know how many briefcases actually were distributed, yeah, both in Penang and Kuala Lumpur, in order to facilitate the particular project, which was not on tender. It was just like an offer to do a bridge, yeah, and with some rights with regard to tolls. So something that we know now. And in that briefcase, and this is 1971, 72, was 40,000 ringgit. 40,000 ringgit at that particular time would have bought you a house in Jesselton Road, which now probably is worth, I don't know, yeah, 10 million, 15 billion, yeah. That was the kind of money that was the briefcase. He told me when he that they left their briefcase. He ran after them and told them, you forgot your suitcase here, this briefcase. So that's for you. So he took it back, and then he opened it and he saw this money. Yeah, he said he quickly closed it back and ran after them again and said, "No, I don't want it." This is a story he told me 20 years after it happened. And the last story that I want to say that also lots of people don't know, the role that civil society played in this country, and the single biggest initiative that was actually transforming in terms of thinking and moving forward, for which this civil society group even won the first award on fighting corruption and promoting integrity in the country. And that civil society group is Aliran. Yeah? And we are very fortunate to have Ramakrishnan here with us, who went and received the award for their work. And their first conference, a unique conference, yeah, of people from all over different groups of civil society, academics, and so on, actually met at a major conference, and a book followed from that conference. And amazingly, it looked at spiritual values, it looked at economic issues, it looked at environmental issues, it looked at the future and the total political and governance structure. And that whole book is entitled Corruption, and it is dedicated to victims of corruption, past, present, and future. As you can see, like, this is a stream that will be continuously running. And that book, that conference was inaugurated by the Chief Justice of Malaysia. So you can see how significant there were people always who were joining in. And this was actually the father of the prince, who had also get that. He later became the Sultan of Perak. So these 7 stories are, I think, the interesting story of how this continuous stream of scoundrels and scandals, is actually rooted in and keeps on growing, like with every season, every winter, every summer, every year. I want to end by a very inspirational statement, which again, most Penang people don't know. We have a kongsi, your kongsi in Joliet Street, near where the fire brigade is. And in that kongsi, in the wall, the main wall, is a message, a wise message from ancient times. And this message by a sage is replying to someone who said, "Hey, never mind lah, we just give them some money, we'll get it done." And he said, "No." Because that guy said, "Nobody will know. Yeah, let's do it. Nobody will know." He said, "The heavens know, the earth knows, you know, and I know." And that's such a powerful statement in the place. Maybe one day I'll suggest that they add one more line, that Citizen Nades also knows. Thank you so much for coming in, Nelson. And over to you. Thank you, Gareth.
Thank you so much, Anwar, for that entertaining set of stories about Penang firsts. I mean, this man is, the world's leading booster of Penang, but it even extends to the first corrupt magistrate. in Nades's book, and one of the yeah, but he's a first. We have the world's leading corrupt bum, and he comes from Penang. In fact, his dad's shop is just down the road from the Bookshop, as you know. So I feel intimately involved with him. Please give a very, very warm Penang welcome to Citizen Nades.
Thank you.
It's a real delight actually to finally meet Nades for me, because until this evening we actually hadn't been in each other's company. But a couple of little stories, maybe to contextualize this evening's discussion and conversation, and I hope questions from the floor. When I came back to Malaysia in 2004 to teach at University of Malaya, I was really appalled by how bad the mainstream media had become in the country, at least even since the mid-1990s. There'd been a palpable deterioration. I mean, I'm talking about print media and also, of course, broadcast media. But there was a very unprepossessing newspaper called The Sun. It was a small sheet, 8 pages, 10 pages, something like that.
24 pages.
24 pages, okay. But nothing like The Sun or the New Straits Times or whatever. And that's the paper I tended to read. And one of the reasons was because there was a column regularly by the man sitting on my right that was worth reading. Insightful, progressive.
Very few advertisements.
Thank you, Anwar. So that became my go-to source of investigative journalism and news. So thanks to you, Nades. And, you know, I've been reading your work over many, many years, and I think we should all feel grateful for the testimony that you provided for Malaysian journalism, which has gone through a very, very rough patch over the last 2 decades or so. A second little coincidence, and you didn't know this at all. After I left University of Malaya, I worked, if you can believe this, for Jabatan Peguam Negara, the Attorney General's chambers, appointed by one of the fall guys in your book, Tan Sri Gani Patel. He's a fall guy in here. No, I'm not a lawyer, unlike you.
Yep.
But we worked in a special research unit. And so we saw the inside of the belly of the beast. And I don't use those words lightly. It was the end of Badawi's period and the very beginning of Najib's period. In fact, I resigned a few months after Najib came to power. And one saw in action the way that the Attorney General's chambers, which had all kinds of guarantees as an independent or quasi-independent branch of the political system, had actually been deeply, deeply, deeply compromised and politicized, not simply by Najib, it was already there during Mahathir's time, but that process had become extraordinarily close. So the executive branch of the government under Najib actually made the AG's chambers an instrument of executive power. And a much sadder third story for you, connected with 1MDB. One of my really good coffee friends at the AG's chambers was the late Kevin Moraes. Those of you who do not know the story, Kevin was found dead, murdered in a barrel of concrete. Of course, the blame was attached to all kinds of other people. We know where the true blame actually lies. And that gave a deeply shocking symbolic measure of the extent to which the ruling elite, the ruling class in this country, would actually go to silence dissidents. Kevin was very, very close to revealing a huge cache of documentary evidence to do with the 1MDB scandal, and he ended up in a barrel of concrete. And friends from the region, and I have 2 friends from the Philippines, said, isn't this something that usually happens in the Philippines or Indonesia or Thailand? No, this is also a reality in Malaysia. So those are my few words of contextual background. And unusually, although when we do events here, it's because I propose a particular forum to Ki Beng. In fact, in this instance, it was Anwar who approached me, and he said, listen, we'd like to invite Nades to come here for his new book. And I immediately said yes. It will be a real privilege and honor so to do. Before we start talking about the book, Nades, I wonder if you just tell us a little bit about your own personal background. I think the biographical always informs the work. And your own background, your own upbringing, your own education, and so on, before your initial entry into the field of journalism?
Yes, I was born in Klang, and I started, one of the things that got me to become a reporter was in Form 1, if I'm not mistaken, Form 2. I started writing letters to the editor complaining about the market, complaining about the potholes. And one day my letter appeared in the letters column in the Straits Times. That time there was no new Straits Times, the Straits Times. At the assembly, the headmaster, Mr. Lee Manu, God bless his soul, called me up, congratulated me, and at the assembly and all that. And I continued writing. So when I left school after Form 5, finishing my senior Cambridge in 1968, I started as a sports stringer for Klang. So I covered Klang more or less, only sports. I continued singing. I had other jobs like producing paraquat at the chemical company of Malaysia. That was my full-time job, one of those jobs. And my big break came. I continued writing sports until my big break came, the Japan Airlines crash. How many of you remember in Elmina Estate? Right? That was in September 1996 or 97, I can't remember. I was assigned for a game to cover a football match. And we couldn't go out because it's raining so heavily. So I was about the only reporter in the office. And suddenly the news editor screamed, "There's been a plane crash. I need all hands. Any volunteers?" So I went up there, "Listen, I'm here." Although I was only a part-timer stringer. And the full-time guy said, "I'll go to the airport where they'll bring in the injured people. You try and get to the scene." So I jumped into the car, the photographer, and we got to the scene first. And like it or not, I had my picture on the front page of the New Straits Times. As I was coming out, going up from the crash site, I bumped into a little girl thrown out from the plane. So I carried her down, and the cop, the deputy CPO said, "You better rush her to the University Hospital." And I could see she was cold, so I took off my shirt, covered her, and took her to the University Hospital. And when I got back to the office, everybody was screaming at me, "Why are you coming so late?" and blah, blah. I said, "I'd go to the hospital. Can I have 10 paragraphs on how you did this?" So it was on page 1. And that was it. It changed my destiny from making paraquat and gramoxone and doing other odd jobs. Nodin Sopi offered me a job, come and work. And he said, "You're not going to the sports desk. You're more valuable at the news desk." And that's how I started. I'm not turned back. I've done it for the past 50 plus years, except for a couple of years break to read law. Otherwise, I was at it. Have been at it all my life.
It's serendipity. There's a lovely story, and it speaks even initially to the kind of human interest side, which has always permeated your writing, it seems to me. You know, the fact that you took care of this little girl who was a victim of the crash and so on, but the editor's still demanding that you submitted 10 paragraphs immediately.
Yes, I had to do that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have got a full-time job.
I just want to take you back because you said you were in Form 5 when you left was in 1968.
Yep.
Let me just take you back to that time. Obviously, you were quite precocious. You were already writing letters to the editor about potholes.
Yeah.
What are your memories of that particular juncture in Malaysian history? Of course, May 69 would just be around the corner. Do you have strong memories of that particular period?
I have strong memories. I used to read the Straits Times of the famous Abdul Rahman Talib versus D.R. Srinivasagam, the long defamation case, right? That kept me thrilled. I was reading every word of it in 1964, right? So that I have more memories of that than anything else in the 60s. That thing really worked because we had local council elections and DR was president of PPP. He came to support the local candidates. Standing on a lorry, you look at him and say, you got him in awe. This great man, this the man who put the minister out of a job, right? That can worked on me, right? You can bring down somebody if it's really crooked.
And did May 69 have any impact on your thoughts or
No,
indeed, no?
I was in Klang. We're not very much affected. But when the good thing is, when you live in a small kampong like Telok Pelai, where I came from, lifted curfew for 8 hours. So the boys around the neighborhood all of us got on bicycles, went to the school field, took out the matting, and played a game of cricket, 2 sides, 22 of us. And before curfew time, we rolled back the matting and went back to work. We were not affected as such. Only later, I realized this. I had lost 2 of my classmates. Not my classmates, my batchmates. At that time, we had to do Form 6. You had to go to VI or MBS in KL. Klang did not have Form 6. So these 2 boys from the science class, I was in the arts class, were killed at May 13. Very much later, we knew about it.
And did that, as you were maturing, growing up in the era after that, with the turn that Malaysian politics took at the time, I mean, the kind of suspension of parliament for a while and the imposition of a whole raft of fairly draconian laws that took place in that period. Did that also shape your understanding of the direction in which Malaysian politics and society was going?
You see, at that time, I was not interested in writing politics. I was more a sports writer. As I was telling you, I was a sports stringer. So, for us, as long as we can get to watch some games, cover the games, I used to play hockey and cricket, so I used to play both regularly. Life went on. So there was not much focus or thought on May 69.
So just play up and play the game.
Yeah, forget all the ills of the country, enjoy ourselves. You're in your teens, so what do you do?
Sure. So when did that process actually begin to affect you? When did a sort of, the man who would become the crusading journalist later, the man who would become, if you like, a tribune of the people, when did that process of awakening and engagement really begin to kick in?
No, that was way back in the 60s.
In terms of your career, your journalism?
No, even before that, what got me, since you asked me what got me going on this, those days we had no telephones. With the whole neighborhood, one guy will have one telephone, and you want to use it, or you at his mercy. In case there was somebody needed an ambulance or what. So I decided to get a petition, neighbors signed for a public telephone in the area. So finally, when they got it, they came to me and said, "Hey, you wrote this letter." I said, "Yes." "We put it near your house." I said, "No. You put it near the shops where everybody gathers." So that thing got me going. More than anything else, to do something good. Okay. That I was 14 years old.
But moving forward, once you establish yourself as a sports journalist and so on, what was the opening for yourself to actually begin to address social, political, economic questions of the country?
Okay. As I said, it took me in full time not to do sports. I covered everything, crime, not much politics, business, news, and social, even I did lifestyle. The point is this: you only get to do this as a reporter. You always said you always told your job is to report. Keep your opinions to yourself. That's what young reporters are told, right? So you only get a column in those days. You only get a column, I think, after 20 years of writing. Somebody will tell you, "Hey, why don't you write a column or something like that?" So my first column was a thing called Consumer Affairs, So I was addressing rights of consumers, what do you do when you have a defective product, the Sales of Goods Act, of your rights. So that I had that column in the Sunday Mail long before I started anything else. When I went to the Leader in 1993, that's when I started writing on other issues because nobody was there to tell me you can't write this, you can't write that. I was quite independent. I had Frankie, my friend. Both of us were running Leader and we had a perfect understanding. And we went to town on issues. We took on the PJ local council and the president, and he remarked at that stage, Nadeswaran is worse than Andrew Neil. So Andrew Neil was a man who condemned Arte, so I'm worse than him. So that I built up a name as Citizen Nades from then, 1993. Then I went off to read law in 1996. I came back in 98. I went to Brunei to start a newspaper. You did? I did. And of course, they couldn't accept my kind of the freedom I sought. Right? So because every paragraph concerning the royalty, you know, that His Highness, His Royal Highness, Al-Billah and all that nonsense. Even the children had to do that. I said, this is not a cup of tea. I packed my bags after 6 months, less than 6 months, then I came back. Okay? So came back, I was offered a job by the Sun, the old Sun. Mr. Heng Ang Yong was the editor, another Penang boy, Penang Free School captain at one time, head boy at one time, or St. Xavier's, I can't remember. He said, come and join the Sun. And so I started with the Sun, and the next thing I knew is, a month after I joined the Sun, the paper was suspended.
Probably because of you.
No, I had nothing to do with it. This was the plot to kill PM, the famous heading. So all the big guns were suspended. I was left alone in the office. More or less run the show with a few others, and then it's history. The age group took it over and got it going and started my column all over again.
I'd like to pick up on your time at the Sun because I mean that's absolutely central to the investigative journalism that you've become well known for. But I just want to ask you a very simple question: what possessed you at that age to actually go and read law?
No, I one of the reasons I read law was I quite had a grasp of the laws, especially consumer laws. I could interpret them because I talked to lawyers and everything else. And every time you argue with the monkeys down there, what are you talking about? Our legal advisor said this one cannot. So I said, listen, this must stop. And besides, I got up on New Year's Day in 1995 and told my wife, if I lose my job, I got nothing to fall back on. I only got senior Cambridge grade 2. Okay. And I said, I'm going to study law and write classes. And she said, you do it. So that was it. Packed up went for night classes, did well, got a 1,000 ringgit discount for my second year. And I went to UK, I got a £1,000 discount because I did very well. And I missed my first class by 3 percentage points because they combined the marks I got here and there. Anyway, never mind. I came back with a good second class upper with the distinctions in consumer law and company law.
But you never practiced as a lawyer, did you?
No, I worked. My friend is there, Raymond.
Yes, Raymond.
Raymond used to be the MD of Warner Brothers, Warner Music, sorry. So Warner took over another company, and the merger and everything else. I was looking at all the legal contracts with the artists and everything else. I traveled with him to Indonesia to sort out all the problems with the okay. That's a little bit I practiced until I went back to justice.
So you're back in journalism by now. It's the late 1990s.
Yeah.
And I mean, if people had fallen asleep for 20 years, okay, just use your imagination for a moment. So take yourselves back to 1998, and you'd fallen asleep for 20 years to 2018. So who was Prime Minister in 2018? Mahathir. Who was in waiting? Anwar. So let's go back to 1998. Who was the Prime Minister? Okay, so it was almost like, take us back to those days, 97, 98,
You see, the point,
99.
Gareth, I came back from UK
Right at that time.
98. Then I went on to Brunei. By the time I came back, the Anwar began his demonstrations. I was involved in the Commonwealth Games cricket. The venue in PKNS was one of the venues. I was the venue manager. So we also engrossed with one side with the Commonwealth Games, and that's why Anwar and the Reformasi were. So at that time, I didn't work for anyone. I just come back and waiting for a job.
So in some ways, ironically, for an investigative journalist, you know, the most momentous political transformation, you know, of independent Malaysia slightly passed you by, which is ironic.
Yes.
But what did you think at the time when you had some time to reflect on the significance of the entire Reformasi process?
No, I had friends in the media at that time, all my contemporaries, and all of them complaining on how unfair their bosses, the editors, have been on Anwar and everything else. So they used to give bits and pieces of the directives they got and everything else. So I knew it's happening. But at that time, you couldn't do anything, right? You had ISA hanging over you. I had visit from the Specialized branch, which I done a piece of kind of thing. But
That's a technical term, is it?
yeah. Okay. So these things were happening, and we could only watch, and there were chat among us. You know, I distinctly remember I got very angry before the death affidavit was filed in court. Right? The Malay Mail had already published the affidavit, which would have constituted breach, right? But nobody bothered. Augustine Paul was the sitting judge, right? But nobody bothered. So what could you do? At that time, when editors were political appointees, right? And the Sun, at that time, was not so independent after, because, of course, Sun was, the owner of the Sun was very connected to, Mahathir. Okay. No, I wanted to, since having talked about the present day journalism, okay, I'm worried, like you and all of you all, okay, I am worried of the quality and the standard of journalism in this country. Okay? I'm really worried because we are not producing or not getting the right candidates. If you give me a choice, I would rather employ somebody who has just left school, who is hungry for success, hungry to make it. What we are having is we're having universities, especially private universities, churning out kids, right? Who come there. These days you can do it on a computer. One of the first things I teach my young reporters is how to do a file search at the register of companies. You go there, you line up, you pay $2, get the file, right? These days you can do it on. They do not have working skills, right? Because they're not taught working skills. Even I do not know whether they are taught how to do a file search or how to get a copy of a report or whatever it is. These skills are missing. Besides, I do not know because academics are teaching them. Some of them have never been in a newsroom. So they're not giving an actual picture of what is in the newsroom. Okay, I taught part-time in one of those private universities. I didn't last long because I disagreed with the kind of censorship they were putting on the students. Right? I'll give you this incident. They were linked to the USM, and one of the final year students was supposed to come out with a newsletter. And I told this fellow in the class, I divided the class into two: news gathering, news processing. So these guys write, these guys will edit and layout and everything else. And I said, you're free to go. And there's this guy who wrote, Mate just stepped down. And he wrote, after 22 years of tyranny, we are finally free, kind of thing. And I saw it's an expression of opinion. Went to print 10,000 copies, pulled up, burnt, Nadeswaran got the sack. So you tell me now, how are you going to, what kind of journalists are you producing from these universities? Right? You must be allowed some kind of freedom for them to express themselves. I'm being very honest with you all. I always take interns. I enjoy training interns. Okay, I never touch interns from any university except UCSI. You heard of UCSI? I find the students from UCSI are not rich people's kids, right? They can't afford to go to UCSI, and they're hungry for success. I had a lady working for me, a girl. We were working on a foreigners running restaurants and everything else, restaurants, photo set shops and everything. And she went there and sat there for 2 weeks, recording everything for me to check. So they have when you are hungry for success, you will do a lot of things. But if you I've dealt with graduates from other universities, they come to the office. Father sends, chauffeur is standing there. Chauffeur is waiting outside to go for assignment. So you see, fellas like us were using our own bicycles to cover games. Right? So I'm feeling very sorry, I'm getting very worried. If you look these days, we are finding it, newspapers are finding it more and more difficult to get they've been taught at university level of self-censorship, self-control. I'm sure there are a lot of reporters who are currently working in the newspapers who are brilliant writers who can express themselves well, who can express good opinions, balanced opinions. They're not given an opportunity. Yeah.
I'd like to return to that more generic problem of whether journalism later on in our conversation.
Yeah.
But I think it's probably opportune now to actually turn to the main focus of tonight's event. And of course, this is the publication of a whole series of articles that you wrote from 2015, and the last article dates from 2019.
Yep.
So it's a 4-year period, the tumultuous period, dominated politically, not only here in Malaysia, but globally, by the 1MDB scandal. Now, right at the outset of the book, you actually rhetorically asked the question, why this book and why now? So let me put that same question to you. After all, the Sarawak Report has written, their particular set of insights. The Wall Street Journal journalists have also made their contribution. Yeah. And here comes Citizen Nades. Why this book? Why now? What's the rationale for putting the book out there?
Okay. When these articles, except the one in 2019, were written, the word 1MDB was a 4-letter word as far as newspapers were concerned. We could not write anything about 1MDB unless it's favorable, like they're sponsoring 60 pilgrims to do the Umrah, or that's what you can write. Anything else you couldn't write. And my bosses used to get calls you couldn't write. So that was the system we were operating under. And each time I work on a story, I know it's going to be difficult. I had to do satire, use fat boy, big mama, and that kind of satire. But mainly because the story, in my preface, I say, people will forget, and people have forgotten the bad times we went through before 2018. The number of people who were arrested under SOSMA, right? The age was suspended, age financial daily was suspended, Ho Ketat was arrested and detained, Jahabah Sadiq was arrested and detained, and so another two other journalists. How many of you all remember this? I know it's all been forgotten because now you get more exciting news about Birkin handbags, raid in apartments in whatever it is in Bukit Bintang. You see, these are the things we had. You know, the kind of problems editors, at least some of them were brave enough to just throw up and leave. But remember, editors are also human. When you have a mortgage to pay for your house, right? And car installments to pay, and your daughter is in university, and where do you go when you lose your job? So everybody, all the editors played ball. I was not directly an editor, I had my own section kind of thing. Whenever I put pen to paper, my thoughts always then, I will not allow 400 people to lose their jobs, even temporarily, because they won't have income. But what I write, and they suspend the license, 400 others will be out of a job. The printing boys, the delivery boys, the photographers, and everything else. So this is always on your mind. Right? I worked around the system quite well. Okay, I worked around it, and I did not take calls from the boys from the monkeys from the fourth floor. Right? I refused to deal with them, and I continued writing until at the end of December 2016. By the way, my original contract with the Sun when I joined them in 1999 was that at that time the retirement age was 55. Right, so I retired in 2006, right? And thereafter, my contract was renewed year to year without question. Sometimes I get my renewal letter, 3 months later I carry on working. But in 2016, in beginning of December, I got a letter, first paragraph. This is to inform you are no longer extending your contract. Thank you very much for your past services. Signed. So I lost my job. And I went to launch Curi Curi Malaysia in Melbourne. One of the guys said, listen, you lost your job because the guys instructed Vincent Tan not to renew your contract. So I left it at that. You know, I do not proceed with the matter. But they're all business people. I quite understand, right? Well, that is why I'm saying the articles I have written in 2005 and 2006 were during 2015 were during bad periods, real bad. And I only know one editor who just threw in his letter and walked away because he had a nice kampong house, he settled himself and everything else. But others stayed on. 3 of them shamelessly appeared on TV, right? Praising Najib, nothing wrong, thing is perfect. You all remember that? These are the things that happened. Right? The guys who stood up and tried to write something like The Age. For me, The Age at that time was compulsory reading every Saturday, without fail. Right? And I got a lot of material from there because I read it, I understood, so I know how the system works. I take a little bit of credit when you all remember Xavier used those tapes, the documents. At that time, I just been sacked from MACC, but my contacts with MACC were there. I accompanied Hoketat to hand over the hard disk with 150,000 email from Justo and on 1MDB. So that is the reason why I wrote this book. We may have go through the difficult times. From now on, we do not know yet, right? Although we are told about a free press, freedom of press, right? No political appointees and here and there. First thing, hardly the ink dried on the paper, they appoint another politician. So don't expect too much. That'll be for another book, maybe.
No, it's often said that good journalism, at least, is the first draft of history. And I mean, I think the value of the book lies in its unvarnished state, that Nades was writing this material. You've not edited the material. This is how it appeared in its original form. And there's a certain urgency, a certain vitality, but also you get the sense in which you're navigating through some, very devious pathways in order to even get the stories out without compromising, as you say, others within the realm. That must have been very, very difficult at that time.
You know what is most difficult chapter I wrote? One day I decided I'm going to be Najib's good books.
Right.
I decided, okay, listen, everything has failed. I decided to make a statutory declaration. It's in the book. I, Nadeswaran, hereby solemnly declare that I will support you and your party under the following conditions. So I put 17 conditions. Okay. So you got away with that kind of things. If I put anything, if I asked for him to do open tenders and all that, MDB, please explain where about a diamond ring, I would have got it. But I made this declaration. Everybody looked at me and said, well done. Right? He couldn't touch you because you promised him support. These are the conditions he imposed. So these are the ways we got around working when we write these things.
Besides perhaps Claire Rucastle Brown at Sarawak Report and The Edge, as you say, and yourself, what was the role of the mainstream media, especially the media that's very much associated with or indeed even owned by Barisan constituent parties? What are your views of then at the time and indeed now in retrospect at others in your profession?
I was really angry. They demonized Mahathir for whatever he was at that time, right? And then when Mahathir came in, they all lined up, ran after him to New York to kiss his hands when Mahathir spoke at the UN. Editors went there.
When was this? Back in
2018?
Yeah.
Come, you must be consistent at least, right? You demonize the man that's the end of the story. Here you are going and kissing his hands, right? So what kind of editors do you provide? What kind of leadership do you provide? So this really made me sick. And I told one of them off. Today he's proudly taking pictures. Anwar, he had taken pictures with Muhyiddin, had taken Ismail Sabri. Well, the circle continues. On Instagram, all his photographs up there. But the point is this, produce your stuff, be consistent, have some principles. This is sadly lacking with the leadership in newspapers, right? But please, I'm a great believer that print media will come back.
Really?
Yes. Because there's so much rubbish on social media and in the electronic media. I am sure you will trust a newspaper more than what comes out in your WhatsApp message or whatever it is.
But don't you think that people's reading and consumption habits have been so altered that the kind of more reflective reading that one gets from reading the print media is rapidly disappearing? So I'm playing devil's advocate.
No,
I'm going to say, I'm somebody who does read a newspaper, but I'm going to say to you, no. I need 147 characters in a tweet, and that's fine by me. If Elon Musk, is running the show, that's fine by me.
No, you look at the number of news portals that have sprung up. Okay. All of them are guns for hire, or rather, most of them are guns for hire. You have lost your credibility in so many ways, right? You try to promote one guy and everything else. Come on, you don't. How long can you go on with this? How long will people continue reading you or believing you? So I'm saying that because print media has got some its credibility restored after Najib's departure, right? And now with the new government and everything else, I think there's room for newspapers to come back, because there's so much of rubbish. I know somebody who's supposed to be aligned with one party went to the other side and said, listen, I need some money. Can I support you now? Can you give me some money? Right? This was the pre-election time. So I seriously believe it's a matter of time, not 1 or 2 years, as social media and news portals keep on losing their credibility. This is going to happen. And when all the Anwar has promised legal action, defamation suits and everything else, it's going to happen.
I mean, you talk more generally about news portals, but what's your thoughts about well-established ones like Malaysiakini or Free Malaysia Today or Malaysian Insight? Do they have a valuable role to play in terms of a kind of modern journalism?
Yes. I think I'm worried about newspaper ownership of news portals. Malaysiakini is funded by individuals. Malay Mail, of course, is independent. But you see, I don't want to mention names of portals. Before
you should.
FMT, for example, right? Before the elections, it was taken over, right, by politicians. And you look at the pre-election stories promoting a certain candidate, you saw it very clearly, right? He's the best person, kind of thing. So again, if you allow this kind of articles, you're going to lose your credibility.
But this is not just a Malaysian problem, surely. I mean, the whole question of ownership and therefore control, this is a global phenomenon. I mean, Murdoch, suddenly deciding that he's going to place his bets now on DeSantis as opposed to Trump, that's a tactical and strategic decision that's been made.
I was in UK in 1996 as a student. 97 was the elections. Early 97, Murdoch and his newspapers turned from anti-labor to blah with the new labor. But the point is you make it so official and okay. Here you're suddenly doing it under the guise of being independent. Right? That is the danger.
It's equally true, and Philippines is a very good example, that the job of being a journalist, if you look at the non-governmental organization Reporters Without Borders, modeled on Doctors Without Borders. I mean, when they report on the number of deaths and intimidation of reporters around the world, our region does very, very badly. I mean, the Philippines is one example, Indonesia, and of course, Thailand, where, very powerful lèse-majesté laws actually prescribe you even making commentaries about the royal family and even the military. So, I mean, journalists live in dangerous times in many, many ways.
Well, not in Malaysia.
Not so much in Malaysia, but it's a different kind of corruption of the profession. I'd like to maybe end my own questions with asking you to reflect on the recent elections, not at the surface level of a kind of changing of the guard and, Anwar's quarter of a century wait to be fulfilled and finally becoming prime minister. What for you were the most significant outcomes of the recent election?
For me, all I can say is don't expect too much, right? Anwar can be a promising young man. Okay. Sorry, promising young man. Okay. In his new role as PM. I don't want to. As I told you, look, he announces no more political appointments. Next day, his deputy appoints somebody. Now, what is this? And he has not commented on it. I wrote a commentary. Vinod wrote a commentary. There's so many NGOs who protested. Nothing. So he's playing ball. Huh? When your deputy has a sword of Damocles hanging over his head, right? January trial resumes. Defense has been called. Right? He says he won't interfere. Thank you very much. I believe him. And I don't think the judiciary will tolerate any interference, at least the current ones. So I am saying don't expect too much. We're expecting too much. This what the same thing happened when Mahathir became the PM for the second time. The Messiah has arrived. No. Right.
But that cult of personality is very strong here. I mean, my own reflection on the election was that people commented on two things in particular. One, and very obviously, Anwar, the promising young man who finally comes to power. I remember interviewing Anwar in 1996. He was also the promising young man then. The second thing that everyone spoke about was, oh, it's the first time Malaysia's ever had a hung parliament. And, you know, that on this sort of technical thing, therefore, inevitably, there would be horse trading going on. And we've seen that came to pass. For me, I don't know if the audience may agree with me, the most astonishing thing was the fact that Parti Islam se Malaysia, PAS, won the most number of seats in the Malaysian parliament with 49 seats, something that almost went unremarked. And also equally that went unremarked is that many of the other parties, notably actually in Pakatan Harapan, who were saying, giving the vote to 18 to 21-year-olds, this is going to be a natural constituency that's going to be for pluralism and progress and so on. No, PAS has been extremely busy working very, very hard. Using new social media, by the way, using online portals, they've done their grassroots work, and that's solidified a young generation and so on. That's the most astonishing outcome of the election, as far as I'm concerned. And it also, therefore, perhaps the fear of that actually created this odd sleeping arrangement we have, these odd bedfellows, strange bedfellows that are basically rubbing each other up the right way. Any reflection on that, the direction of Malaysian politics, that signals?
You see, I think initially I was one of those who joined this group and said, listen, you can't have a guy who's got 42 charges hanging over your head as a deputy prime minister of the country. And then on the other side of the coin, that says, you can't have a guy who wears a turban and promotes Sharia law and everything as a deputy prime minister either. So you choose what do you want. So I think a lot of non-Malays and non-Muslims have accepted that. But I think a lot of my Malay Muslim friends still believe that Muhyiddin and Mahdi should hear. Yeah, respect their views. Right?
Between the devil and the deep blue sea.
Yeah.
Let's open it up to questions from the floor, whether it's specifically on things that Nades has talked about in relationship to his background, what he thinks about the future of journalism or the print media, or just wider reflections on the state of politics. He's a man who's got an opinion about most things. So let's test him out. Anyone?
Nades,
Yeah.
I listened to you with the greatest interest.
Yeah.
Because you and I have trod a very similar path. Me in media in Britain and Singapore and London. Now I'm retired. I've also seen the demise of print journalism and also inquiring journalism. Reporters who reproduce what's given to them rather than ask why they've been given and what the incentive is. And I just want to know whether you agree with me that until the iniquity of this cabal of newspaper ownership in the hands of a few is broken, we will never get the vigorous, free print or online journalism that we require in this dangerous age.
Thank you. I think that will not be an answer. Singapore has laws that no individual can own more than 3% of stake in a newspapers. Has a Straits Sun been a better paper? All right, I'll use this as an example. But the important thing is you must have editors who stand up to these people. That is most important. Right? We need this kind of people who are not afraid to say their piece. I walked away from the Sun in 2008 after the elections. And the boss called me in and said, "Why are you leaving?" I said, "You own 200 companies. And if I write one story in each of the companies, there are 200 companies complaining against me." And he gave me an undertaking. He won't interfere with my work. Right? One day I was out playing golf. I get a call from his secretary. "Boss wants to see you." I go there and he bought me lunch in his office, and he said, "Last night, Azalina called me to stop your story and control you." You know what I told her? "I cannot control Nades and I will not control Nades. Are you happy now? Go and carry on doing your job." Right? So you need to make these demands out of your employers. Right? So they draw a line. Like me, if you tell, if Gareth owns a newspaper, finances my newspaper, I will have difficulty in writing bad about him. Right? Right? And in Syria, okay, we can understand the situation. But in this case, it's not owned by an individual, but political parties. So there should be some leeway, right? I used to joke with my friends in the Star. You have got Wikasyong in every position, wearing helmet on the train and everything else, except sitting on the throne. When are you going to have it? I can joke with my friends in the Star, right? So for some of them, it's compulsory where the party president goes, a cameraman and a reporter must follow. Right? So when you do these kind of things, and editors don't stand up to these kind of things, to tell him, "Sorry, sir, this is not news anymore." Okay? Somebody should stand up and do it. In fact, I told my MD, we don't want too much of Berjaya news in the business pages. And he agreed with me. Right? So we need editors who can stand up more than ownership is not important. Editors. Thank you.
Take another question or contribution from the floor, please. No? Yes, sir.
Yes, I might have missed it, but what happened to the Sucom accounts you really went for?
All right. It's very interesting. Very interesting. I pursued the Sucom accounts from 2000. From 2000, year 2000. And Azalina promised me, she promised me in a press conference, you go and see the KSU, he'll open up. I went there, all folders, right? Nothing. Okay? I pursued it for 3 years. I wrote until the general manager at that time, General Manaf, refused to talk to me. I don't care. I'm doing a job, right? And then a friend of mine promised to donate 5,000 if I could get the accounts. It's okay. But this is what I'm saying. When you deal with this kind of government, this is what happens, right? In any other situation, right? I couldn't go and get a court order to compel them to reveal it, right? I couldn't do anything. Any suggestions? I can still pursue it. No, nobody knows. Every other games, cities that organize the games have closed the account and showed a profit.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I hope my comments will be in some way relevant to all that you've been saying, sir. I know of a quotation in English but out of Germany that says that we live life forward, but we understand it backwards. And I think going back to the comment earlier about the role of journalists, which is to write the first draft of history, they also have a part to play in reviewing and criticizing and analyzing and all the rest of it, so that we begin in the early stages to understand life backwards.
It's deeply philosophical.
Thank you.
Backwards to the future. Kide.
Well, a couple of comments, perhaps, and questions. One is that since the coming of Malaysiakini and the news media, surely journalism must have changed dramatically in Malaysia since 98 or whatever it was. And I also wonder about what you said about how you need brave editors. I'm sure that's true as well. But you also need, of course, brave journalists and well-trained journalists. And I wonder, this might be the question I have for you. In new nations like Malaysia, you tend to, in Singapore as well, you tend in the early decades to downplay the importance of social sciences, right? You always play that down and you go for the engineering and whatnot. Now, I wonder if journalism as a platform where people analyze their own society and their own leaders and so on, will require a society that is rather well educated in the social sciences. But if that is not so, then the journalism, the standard of journalism, I assume, will follow suit, as it were. Does that make sense?
I don't quite agree with you. Your academic qualification or what you have studied is of no relevance when you come into the newsroom, right? For me, right? I always say, listen, you're here, you learn on the job, you get up, this is what you do it well, right? That's how you go about it.
Who is this deciding who does well? The editor? Or?
The editor.
And where did he get his
like me, I was a senior Cambridge grade 2 boy, right, until 1998, right, 1996. Look, P.C. Shivadas was the first graduate to be employed by the New Straits Times in 1963. Before that, all the reporters before him, and after that, the great writers like Uni Krishnan, P. Krishnan, Felix Abhishekanatham, were all just senior Cambridge and less. Felix Abhishekanatham was a teleprinter operator, right? So I don't think the qualification matter. It's a kind of training they get. I did 2 sessions of training with Kini Academy on investigative journalism. Sad to say, the newspapers, news portals made up for less than 10% of the students. Others were university students. They came for the course. It was done over 2-3 weekends, and they produced some good work and everything else. And after that, where do they go? So the point is this: if you give them proper directives, right, you can create great journalists. There are 3 UCSI graduates, undergrads who worked with me. 2 of them are now flying in the Star. Another is into one of the newspapers.
My point is really that journalism, the standard of journalism, grows along with society's development itself. Or
Yes,
do you see
yes, I totally agree.
That's my point.
I totally agree with you. Right? What was Like I always tell these people, those days, we call somebody a communist. People look like nowadays there is nothing. So as development and society advances, but the principle of journalism still remains the same. Go out there, investigate, get down to the truth, which is unlike social media. Somebody tells you something, you put it on and you assume it is the truth. Yes, sir. You're at the back.
Can I come back to that same point, maybe slightly more secular?
No problem.
So, the first part of my question is things like blogs and podcasts.
Uh-huh.
You would consider that journalism? And the second part of it is that, to me at least, it's actually a very attractive, very egalitarian, very democratic model of journalism, in the sense that you're not beholden to your authority, you're beholden to your audience.
Did you get the two questions? So the first one was there are some high quality blogs and podcasts out there, and do you consider them part of the bigger family of contemporary journalism?
Doing your work. I think that would be the most direct.
No, I don't think they can do our work for the simple reason. I'll give you like 1MDB. Okay, I openly declare I did not have the resources. Even though I work in a newspaper, I had reporters working for me. I did not have the resources like the H had, right? So you put this guy in the similar situation, right? Where is he going to get his resources, right? Now, number two is, if he relies on hearsay and somebody sending him some anonymous thing, what difference does it make? It's another rumor monger, right? I've always joked with my friends who are bloggers. I said, blogging is for unemployed and unemployable journalists. It's a joke, huh? Don't take me seriously. Yeah.
May I just put in an observation I didn't make earlier? In my observation, just since coming back to Malaysia, I used to be a journalist a long time ago here. I noticed journalism on a daily basis, how it's practiced at press conferences and so on, seems to be that, well, the first draft of history is the journalism as it is done here is the first draft of history by the politician, because their reporting is always about what the politician says. Nobody else really matters. And that seems to be the culture in journalism that I see on a daily basis.
Okay.
You know, there are exceptions, I'm sure. But
No, I totally agree with you. Basically, they report.
report the politician.
Report the politician, report what's happening in court, report events. But there's another group in the newspapers who write features, who write columns, right? So you see, you can't have a newspaper full of columnists, right? So you need these support services as well, or rather the columnists and the commentators become support crew of the news team or whatever it is. So we need a comprehensive team of people to produce for the people. I always maintain we must write for the reader, right? And we cannot second guess. When I was acting foreign news editor, in those days it was teleprinter, you know, I had to decide what foreign news should Malaysians read. Can you imagine what kind of burden is on you, right? So my late editor, late Mr. David Tambaya, he used to tell us, over drinks, if 50 people die in India, it's only a pillar, Okay? In a train crash, if 5 people in KL, you better put it on the front page. Okay? But that's jokes aside. I don't know how many of you know where Burkina Faso is. Right? Yeah, okay. So I've not been there. I only heard of it very much later when one of its swimmers won a medal in Olympics. Suriname was another one. So I decided, play by ear. A lot of Chinese readers want to know what's happening in China, Taiwan. Indians want to know what's India, So my news was more towards that and towards UK, because the older ones like me and Anwar and all that, we grew up in an era where we sang God Save the Queen, right? So you take a mix of all that. So that's how I worked as a foreign news editor. But another editor may have a different view altogether. So it's very difficult to satisfy everyone. Okay, if you look at the vernacular papers, especially the Malay papers, when the spate of Catholic priests were convicted for playing with small boys, it was big news in the vernacular papers. Right? Again, going back to those days when I was a acting foreign news editor, you compare the jets that Iran had shot down and Iraq was shot down. Every day they say we shot down. This is a 465th jet we shot down. You add more the thing, the whole Air Force would have disappeared. Okay, so these are things that we laugh about it. And this story I want to relate. Not me, one of the guys. We call them PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization, freedom fighters. So the wire copy comes, PLO terrorists. Okay, so this guy got a warning letter. They're freedom fighters. Then came the Tamil Tiger terrorists. Tamil Tiger freedom fighters. The Sri Lankan High Commission landed in the news president's office protesting. So these are the vagaries of the job that you go through and you learn the hard way. Any other question? Yes.
I have two comments. It's not only politics that is sensitive. You may recall recently 2 editors of The Age were charged by the AG, although the companies that were mentioned could have taken civil action. The AG took it upon himself to charge them for criminal defamation. But fortunately, one of them has been given a discharge not amounting to an acquittal. I think Azam Aris was acquitted. The second point I want to make is about the quality of journalism. Generally, I don't think it is only journalism. It is very pervasive throughout Malaysian society. I just give you one example. One of my favorite programs is Astro Awani 501, Consider This, where Melissa Idris interviews a lot of people on current affairs. Now, on a number of occasions, she has interviewed people representing the National Council of Professors. Most disappointing, to say the least. I think it's a general indictment on the public universities in this country. Thank you.
Okay, let me address that first issue first, about Azam Aris and everything else. This was really peculiar. We all protested. You see what the reports were on a group of people short selling and playing with penny stocks. Big syndicate, and they made millions, and the Age exposed it. The syndicate was so powerful that they went to the Brickfields police and got the Brickfields police to open investigation papers. And the syndicate was so powerful, it got the okay from the AG to prosecute. They were not against the story. They wanted to know who the writer was, and who leaked from the syndicate leaked the information. There was no byline because, as when you do sensitive stories like this, people throw acid on your face. So editors make a decision. This story, no byline, we've got to protect you. The syndicate was interested in finding out who wrote the story. Right? Does that answer your question? You see, the point is that we are still wondering. I've not until the other Shanmugam's charges are withdrawn. I don't want to touch it yet. After that, I got to raise this question again. Your second one about a council of professors, I call them Kangkong professors. I don't want to talk anymore about it.
I'd like your take on, I guess, a similar case. This is the and I thought it was quite interesting because the same judge, this is the same judge that later on convicted did the final conviction of Najib. And so what would appear to be, her setting up that the judiciary is its own thing and it's powerful. But from another point of view, I thought, contempt of court is, it surely cannot be equated to a fine of that magnitude against Malaysiakini, which, if you remember, was quite enormous.
Okay, I let me tell you about the case. There were 3 comments in the comment section, right, which accused the judiciary and certain judges of being corrupt, being on the take, and everything else, which was subsequently removed. The police came under order from the court order for Malaysiakini to reveal the identity of the 3 writers. Okay? No choice. It came with a court order. You don't obey the court order, you're going for contempt. Now, my question is, when in the newspapers, we keep copies of the letter in those days. Sometimes we clip it to an envelope that comes in from, in case anything happens. But this was an email address. Right? Email, I can create many Gmail accounts or Hotmail accounts and all kinds of funny names. You really want to trace, you got to go to the IP address. But if I go to a cyber cafe and send it, difficult. So that was the fault. Malaysiakini removed those comments immediately on being notified. But yet, judiciary said, you can't hold me responsible if a reader writes that way. But in newspapers, we get sued for defamation. The editor gets sued for defamation. I'm the only guy who sued the newspaper because they apologized on my behalf. No, because I said, you're insulting me. Right? You're saying I made a mistake. I didn't make a mistake. There's another long story. But this is what happens. Okay? You live with it, right? That final decision made by the voting was 6-1, except for Nalini who dissented. Everybody else agreed with Maimun. Yes, sir.
2 questions.
Yes.
First question. For Malaysia, what are the necessary changes legally or structurally to protect the freedom of the press? Second question, based on the experience of your investigation to 1MDB, what, in your opinion, are the necessary changes to the government structure or the constitution to prevent such things from happening again?
Okay, first of all, let me correct myself. I never investigated 1MDB, right? I'm only writing commentaries. You see, for me, if you want to change this, anything in this country, we got to change the structure of the education system. That's where the rot starts. If you have a good education system, which allows you to express yourself, right, freely, makes understand, exchange of ideas and views, right? You see, I went to school. I learned about Francis Drake, right? Sir Walter Raleigh. I also learned about Hang Tuah, Sultan Mansur Shah, Hang Lipo. Today, you ask the kids who is Francis Drake, they won't know, right? So you see, the education system has got to be changed. You got to change the education system for every other structure to fall in place. You must, if you have a good education system, then you're going to get a rounded guy coming to university, right? You're going to get a rounded guys coming out of university as graduates who join the service and change. But we are going to work within this silo of this kind of education system. I have no hope, right? As you're aware, our ministers and MPs send their children overseas for studies while they scream here and say, go to local schools, right? So where do you go from here? So for me, for anything to change, education, it must start from education.
Education. In my school, Penang Free School in the 60s, we had, besides the annual magazine, we had a newsletter produced by the students themselves, PFS newsletter. In 1971, I wrote a letter to protest against a badge that they asked us to wear. My editor was Ki Tuan Chai. And the following year, he nearly got sacked from school for having printed that letter. But the thing is that at that time, we had that expressive thing in us.
Yes.
The school encouraged us.
Yes.
So is it there now? I don't think so. It's all gone, sadly.
You see, I used to go back to school, to my school, for annual speech day. I've not been there for the past 20 years. I don't know whether it's still have it. I don't know. In our school, our Klang High School, we had on teak boards. Name was school captain, scholar of the year, cricket captain, rugby captain, and everything else. Boards all have gone. Okay, never mind, we are digressing. But the point to note is this. I honestly believe a change in the education system will change the way the country is moving.
But the problem lies not just in your experience of Penang Free School back in the day. I mean, we've had experience even through the bookshop of trying to get past gatekeepers in Sekolah Kebangsaan, okay? And their experience compared to the relative privilege of kids going to Uplands or other international schools, you might as well be inhabiting completely different planets. So I'm talking about trying to bring writers, people like Hannah Alkaf or whatever, into Sekolah Kebangsaan, and teachers are scared stiff, you know, to go against whichever injunction from the education ministry and so on, and what if is this controversial? So you have this kind of deficit of ambition on behalf of those kids, and that feeds into, I think, whatever the opposite of a virtuous circle is, a vicious circle of underachievement and under-ambition. And this is actually an experience that's actually fairly global. You see it with working class kids in many, many societies around the world. But as I said, in relationship to the success of PAS in the recent election, at a different parallel level, those religious schools and so on have been extremely proactive, but in a very particularist direction. And I mean, I don't know, I don't have a teenage kid. Where would you send a teenage kid? Because, you know, would you send them to Penang Free School or St. Xavier's or so on, which are also constrained by the strictures? Or do you pay profit mongering Uplands and these other schools, you know, huge amounts of money? Well, that's for the privileged, to be frank. So what are we left with? And of course, you're right, the politicians, the ethno-nationalist politicians still send their kids to the UK or Australia or UK. The Sekolah Kebangsaan are the dumping places for the masses, and that's a sad reality. Listen, it's been a really, really engaging time. Fantastic questions. But it is 9:45, and it's nearly his bedtime. So I just like, I'm sorry.
Can I just keep Nades with this one thing?
Okay.
I don't know whether it's okay for you, but the alter ego of Superman is a reporter.
Okay. Nades, your fan club is out in abundance tonight, of course. You know, okay, so could we give a very, very warm Penang thank you to Superman, aka Citizen Nades.
The book is
And Raymond has come, you know, this man who used to be Mr. Big at Warner has come here, and he's got the books there on sale. If you want to read the first draft of history, go to it. I'm just going to take this opportunity to say thank you to all of you. As Ki Beng said at the beginning, this is the last public event at Penang Institute for this year. And we're very, very happy that the Bookshop and Penang Institute are joining forces once again for the first event of 2023. Can you believe the year's nearly through? And I'm really, really happy. He's a very good friend of mine, Professor Lim San San. one of the world's leading experts on the social impact of digital technology. She used to be at the LSE, now she's at Singapore Management University. But lucky woman, she's married to a guy from Penang. So that means she has to come up to Penang. So I hijacked her, and on Tuesday, the 3rd of January, right here, Sansan is going to be giving a really interesting talk. Her new book, which is out from Oxford University Press, is called Transcendent Parenting. And she is really looking at what the impact has been of digital technology for that most essential thing of all, relationships within families. If you have kids, or if you've ever been a kid, be here or be square. And once again, give it up for Superman, T-Bang, to Dato Anwar, and to yourselves for being such a great audience. And you can't leave the room until you buy a book from Raymond. Thank you very much.
All signed ready.